always, I give my highest honor to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I thank Him for this opportunity that He has blessed me to share with you my time at Violator, the management company and the record company, actually. I ended up at Violator after I signed a record deal. I signed to Andre Harrell in '97. Beforehand, I had been running around with the producer Ski Beats, and we were just running around, and every studio session he had, I would be in the studio with him, and we'd be making music for other artists at the same time working on my music. One day I get a phone call from DJ Clark Kent. He asked me where was I at in the city. I told him I was around, met up with him. He told me I had to go to a meeting at Violator. So I'm saying to myself, oh, the Violator, you know, Fat Joe, Chi Ali, that's what I knew of Violator. So long story short, go up to Violator. I meet Dave and Chris Lighty, and Mike Lighty was there that day too. Mike had actually just started working there as an intern. He probably was coming like every other summer, I heard, but now he was here consistently, like living in New York City. So met with them. Clark played them the beats. I was clowning around the entire time I was there. They kept asking, who is this guy? Chris kept asking, who is this? He kept asking Clark, you know, who is this? So we exchanged information. I asked them what they did. They told me what they did. 40 minutes later, I get a phone call from Dave Lighty. He's asking me, where you at? I said, oh, I'm in Manhattan still. He was like, come back by the office. And I'm saying to myself, why? But anyway, I came back by there, had a conversation with them. They asked me who managed me. I told them I didn't have a manager. They asked me, you know, what were you doing? I said I was signed at Harrell Records, Andre Harrell. And they said, hey, we want to manage you. I said, well, all right, let's go. Let's get these checks. Let's go get this paper. As time progressed, you know, I ended up getting out of my deal prematurely, but by request, I asked to get out of my record contract. And Andre, you know, the relationship me and Andre had was cool, so he was like, hey, whatever you want and whatever's gonna make you happy, you know, I'm willing to do that. So here I am, no record deal, signed to Violator, the management company, and I'm in Chris's office. I'm like, Chris, I don't know what I'm gonna do. You know, I need to get another deal. You know, I just had to move out of the corporate apartment I was living in. Like, you know, what is it that I'm gonna do? And Chris was like, you know, listen, just keep making music. So what Chris did is he always made sure I had an outlet to record music. So if he had Mobb Deep in the studio, whenever they didn't show up, I would show up and record. If he had Foxy Brown in the studio and she didn't show up, or she was done before her time block was finished, I would run in there and take the rest of that time and record. He was like, listen, just make records, you know, keep making records, and we'll find you a situation someplace else. I mean, I got to admit, after time progressed, I lost the passion. But Chris always made sure that I had a place at Violator. So I went from being rap artist slash producer to being A&R consultant. Artists would come up there and be meeting with Chris, and he'd call me. I'd hear him from the other side of the office. He'd call me. And it's funny because I always say I don't know who was louder out of him and Lior, but I got to say Lior was louder. Lior used to be yelling all over the office. It'd be crazy. But when artists would come up there, Chris would say, KT. And I would come to his office, and we would listen to the artist. And then he'd look at me and say, let me hear something from you. And I'd say, oh, man, Chris is in here setting people up. So, you know, I'd say a little something. And then that's how he would determine if the artist was built to be a Violator branded artist. I remember the day came, I said, you know, Chris, I want to go home. I'm going back to Boston. And he's like, why? You know, why? What's in Boston? Why are you going back to Boston? I was like, man, I just got to go, man. You know, I got to go. And he was like, all right. So I left. And I remember his assistant at the time was Tanya Wesley. And she called me. And she was like, KT, where you at? I was like, you know, I'm around. She's like, well, come back up to the office. Chris wants to talk to you. So I said, okay. I came back to the office. I remember walking into his office and sitting down. And this was at Def Jam when Violator was at was at Def Jam, and Chris had this little tiny office in the back of the office. And I was like, okay, what's up? He's like, sit down, close the door. I closed the door, I sat down. He had an envelope with $5,000 in it. He said, here, man, don't go back to Boston. There's nothing there for you. He said, stay here, keep recording, keep working with the other artists. He's like, yo, well, make sure you have a place here. He said, we got an apartment in the Bronx. And then I was like, well, Dave said I could stay with him. He's like, well, you could stay with Dave. And I ended up staying in New York for another 4.5 years. And, being part of some monumental moments in Violator history and hip-hop. I remember I was the one who introduced Chris to my son. I remember when 50 first came to the office and Chris was like, yo, what do you think of that? I was like, hey, you need to sign him. I mean, as well as probably everybody else in the office that was saying that. But when I think of Chris, those are the things that I think about. How he was hard on us. Don't get it twisted. Chris was hard on anyone he loved and cared about because he was trying to teach and train you, about work ethic. But at the end of the day, he always made sure that I was taken care of. He always made sure that I was all right, man. And I thank him. God bless his soul. I thank Dave Lighty, Mike Lighty, Jonathan, Akina, Tanya Wesley, Mona Scott, man, Gail, Laurie Dobbins, Ice, Simone, Jay, Brent, James Cruz, Todd Moskowitz. The list could go on and on and on. I could be sitting here naming names forever because there were so many people who came through Violator that I seen come in, one way and leave out a polished executive or leave out a polished artist. Tip, Buster, we all showed each other love, man. But it was just great to say that I was a part of history and a part of a long living legacy that I hope that continues to move forward and goes untainted, man. And so that's what I think about when I think about my life and my times, at Violator. Oh, can't leave this out. I remember there was a time when Chris went to get married. They all flew to Miami and they were all asking me, are you coming down? And I was like, nah, because at the time I didn't have any money and I didn't want anyone paying my way, So I remember I took the Cadillac truck. I was driving around. I went to Boston a couple times. And I remember they were coming back on a Tuesday they were coming back. And that Monday I had came back to New York City. I went to a party. It was the Honey movie premiere. I was there with Andre and my man O'Neal, Rodney O'Neal McKnight, who was responsible for me getting signed to Andre Harrell's label. And I remember I got so drunk, I was like, I can't make it back to New Jersey. And I had the truck. I was like, yo, I'm gonna park this in front of the Violator office. This is when Violator was on West 25th Street. I didn't even make it to West 25th Street. I remember crashing the truck, totaling it. I remember I knocked the street pole down. It was crazy. The next day, Chris gets back into New York City. I walk into his office like, Chris, I gotta tell you something. He's like, all right, I'll call you in a minute. I gotta take care of some things real quick. Am I free up? I'll call you. The city must have called him. He calls me into the office. I explained to him everything that happened, and I'll never forget this. He looked me in my face and he asked me, are you okay? And I was like, yeah. He said, you didn't get hurt, right? And I said, no. He said, nobody was in the car with you. I said, nah, no one's in the car with me. He said, did you hit anyone? Did anyone else get hurt? I was like, nah. He looked at me and he said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. When I think of these things, when I think of Chris, man, and how man, it was tough at his homegoing service. It was real tough for me and a lot of the people who were there, but it was just a blessing to see so many people in a room knowing that he touched each and every one of those individuals in some way. He was a caring and a giving man. He did all he could do to help you as long as you were trying to help yourself. That was one thing that I really respected about Chris. So at the end of the day, these are the memories that I'll have about the times of my time as a Violator.